project scope management. So what exactly is the scope, and why do we need to manage the scope of the project? So if you see, there are several aspects of the project that the project manager will need to look into throughout the life cycle of the project. Okay, so one of them is anyway scope, and if you see schedule and cost. These three are called as triple constraint. First of all, what is a constraint of a project, or what is a project constraint? Any limiting factor that hinders the project progress is a project constraint. Any limiting factor. So we have got several factors explained in PMBOK. PMBOK stands for Project Management Body of Knowledge, and currently we follow 6th edition. And the current version of the PMP is based on 6th edition of the PMBOK. And according to the PMBOK, there are 6 major constraints that every project will go through in any industry. And one more thing, keep in mind, please. This PMI has collected a lot of best practices across the globe with respect to the project management, and they have placed it in an organized way. That is actually the PMBOK. They never told this is the prescription for project management and you have to follow it. No, it is not like that. Those are the best practices collected across the globe from multiple industries, and then they have put it in a structured way. So that exactly is nothing but our PMBOK anyway. Now, according to the PMBOK, there are 6 major constraints that a project manager has to juggle between every day and see that the projects are delivered according to the objectives specified. So scope is one among them. Today we will see that anyway. And then schedule, cost. These three are called as triple constraints because the effect on one constraint will definitely have an effect on one or the other two constraints. That's why these are called as triple constraints. And I'm not going into the depth of these initial topics. Those will be dealt as part of the regular trainings. This being a webinar, I just wanted to concentrate on the key areas of the scope management so that it will be a quick refresher for those people who are already preparing for PMP, and it will be a quick refresher for those people who wanted to pursue PMP and would like to understand what exactly the scope management is all about. And it will be a quick refresher for those people who would like to understand just what exactly is the scope management. So keeping all three wide variety of audience in mind, we are taking care of certain important topics in our today's webinar. Now, so there are 6 major constraints I told. Out of that, triple constraints are this, and your PMBOK recognizes quality as another major constraint, which we will not compromise on, obviously, in any industry, any product. And then risks is considered as one of the constraint, and resources. Resources are majorly of 2 types: human resources, which in PMBOK called as your team resources, and also the physical resources. These are the other 3 constraints basically. And today we will see the scope management and how do we actually take care of this scope throughout the project. Now, having said that, so now whatever you're seeing on the screen, which is nothing but a project. If it is dealt in predictive life cycle, that means initiation, then it goes to planning, then it goes to execution. And always remember, many agile folks may say in traditional we go by waterfall, so each phase is completely done and then go to the next phase. It is not like that. Even in traditional also, your bare minimum planning is done, and then you can start your execution depending on the context of the project. And execution may lead to replanning, and replanning may lead to re-execution. Then this is a cycle here also, and it goes to the closure. And everything is under monitoring and controlling. So there are 5 process groups in PMBOK. In PMP language, these are called as process groups. There are 5: initiation, planning, execution, closure, and everything is under monitoring and controlling. And there are 10 knowledge areas like integration management, scope management, and your schedule management, and your cost management, quality management, your resource management, communication management, risk management, procurement management, and your stakeholder management. So all these are the knowledge areas. So for a project manager to be successful, so if I ask this question, like for example, for a project manager to be successful, what exactly we need? So if I ask this question in multiple batches, people will come with several kind of answers, and one among the best answer is this thing. So you also please remember, for any project manager to be successful, so first of all, he needs to have knowledge on what? Project management practices. He needs to have knowledge on project management practices. So is the knowledge sufficient enough for a person to be successful in the project management field? Definitely not. So he needs to develop his skills over a period of time by taking the simple projects and then growing up his maturity in terms of project management, and then understanding the do's, don'ts, and all that stuff. So he can acquire skills over a period of time by on the job basically. And then what else? So let's say Naveen is knowledgeable and he acquired skills for the last 10 years in successfully delivering multiple projects and complex projects, for example. And I joined an organization where they say like, okay, we don't have any kinds of tools and techniques, Naveen. So we are just giving you some bunch of white papers and couple of pens, and you need to execute $5 million project, for example, and with 500 resources in 3 months, for example, I'm telling. So though a project manager is knowledgeable, though he is skilled enough, so what is missing here? Obviously, the tools and techniques provided by the organization. So it's a combination of everything. Please remember. So the success of a project manager depends on the combination of everything. Basically, he should be knowledgeable enough on the project management practices, and he should have that skills. Of course, over a period of time, he'll acquire this, and the organization also should provide them the tools and techniques. So what exactly is a project management then? So project management is nothing but application of your knowledge, skills, tools and techniques towards the project objectives and delivering the project. That is nothing but your project management. And today we will see the 10 knowledge areas. Out of that, today we will see one of the very important and foremost knowledge area called scope management. So like that, there are several knowledge areas in PMBOK if you observe. So if you go back and see, these are all the knowledge areas. And today we will see scope management. Now, so the moment we say the scope management, the moment I say, for example, I have something to do, I have a project to be done, then what would be your first question? Any vendor's first question would be what exactly is the work that you are going to get it done, right? So that is nothing but the scope. Scope means all the work required. That is the only work required, nothing extra, nothing less. So it should not be, if it is something extra than the planned that we are delivering, that is called as scope creep, obviously. Any uncontrolled or unwanted changes coming into the project is called as scope creep, for your reference. This is a term. So anything extra that we are delivering beyond the scope. So we have promised 10 requirements, but we are delivering the 11th requirement, which is not there and approved in our plan. So something extra than the planned one. It is scope creep. And as a project manager, we should be dead against scope creep. All the work required, and that is the only work required, nothing extra, nothing less, is called the scope of the project. If you are delivering something less, then what is that called as? Missing requirements. And we do not want to fall into this kind of a situation also. Missing requirements or missed requirements. We have promised 10 requirements, but we ended up delivered only 8 requirements, and then we missed to deliver 2 requirements, for example. That is nothing but missing requirements, and we do not want to fall into this situation, and we do not want to fall into this situation. That's why the importance of scope management will come into picture. Now the scope is actually, in the project management language, we divide the scope into two different categories basically. One is product scope. Product scope is nothing but the features, functions, and characteristics of the product that we are going to deliver, which is nothing but your requirements. Requirements are nothing but your stakeholders' expectations, their wishes, their wants, basically. So they will give you their requirements, and when we collect the requirements, which are nothing but the product scope. So the features, functions, and the characteristics of the product that we are going to develop. For example, we are going to develop a new series of a laptop. Okay. So in this new series of a laptop, so it should have this kind of a keyboard, this kind of a screen, and then ultra 4K HD technology of the display, and also like your 1 terabyte memory internal hard disk, and then 16 GB RAM, and all that features, functions, and characteristics of the product that we are going to develop. So who is going to give you the requirements of the product scope? The stakeholders are going to give you. So we need this kind of a design. Please go ahead and get it done, because people are, maybe projects gets initiated for several reasons. It may be because of the customer demand, or it can be maybe because of a market opportunity. So this can be one of the market opportunity for our company to introduce this kind of a product into the market, because we have seen that this kind of a product has got a lot of demand in the market. So that's one of the trigger or initiator of a project, let's say. So the stakeholders will give you the features, functions, and characteristics of the product, which is called as product scope. Now, as a project manager, how do you want to deliver this project then? So what kind of a scope management techniques you wanted to use? What kind of a schedule management techniques you wanted to use? What kind of a cost management techniques you wanted to use? Or the procedures, or the strategy, or the processes, or the standards, whatever it is. So what kind of a quality management techniques you wanted to use? And what kind of a resource management techniques you wanted to use? And what kind of a communication management techniques you want to use, and what kind of a risk management techniques you wanted to use, and what kind of a procurement management techniques do you wanted to use, and what kind of a stakeholder engagement techniques you wanted to use, and what kind of a integration management techniques, integrating all these things under one umbrella, and what kind of a integration management techniques, or what kind of a integrated change control techniques you wanted to use. This is nothing but your project scope. So I told you, right, there are two types of the scope, or the categories of the scope that we can look into. One is product scope, the features, functions, and characteristics of the product. The other one is project scope, which is nothing but what kind of a project management practices, or what kind of a project management techniques that you wanted to use to deliver this product as per the objectives laid in the project charter. So I gave another word, project charter, that is out of context as of now. We will see later. So this keep in mind. So we are trying to deliver this product as per the requirements given by the stakeholders, and and then project manager and the team, they can put up all these project management practices, and how do you want to deliver exactly this scope. Now, so coming back, so let me go over these two for your benefit. So which is nothing but this one, we have seen the project may get into several what do you call phases, or I can call it as domains. I can call it as a process groups as per PMBOK. So there are 5, and there are 10 knowledge areas that the project manager has to look into, right, throughout the project. And there is a product scope and there is a project scope. That's what we have seen till now. Now coming to the scope management, all the work required, and that is the only work required. Okay, somebody has drawn a little bit, so let me take that away, so otherwise it will unnecessarily come in the way. So clear all drawings, right? Fine. So that is what we were trying to mention, all the work required, and that is the only work required, nothing extra, nothing less. This is the only work required. If something extra, then that is called as scope creep. If something less, then that is called as a missed requirement. So in PMBOK, if you go and observe the scope management, for that there will be 6 processes, 4 in the planning process group and 2 in the monitoring and controlling process groups. But we will see one by one using my diagrams here. Now, so how do you want to manage the scope of the project across the project lifecycle? So now that we have seen what is scope and what is product scope and what is project scope, first and foremost thing that a project manager and the team would do is, when we are in the planning stage, so by that time we must have already got our charter signed, which is nothing but a one-time document delivered and signed by the project sponsor. So that's why sponsor is called as an accountable person for a success or a failure of a project. Many people will think project manager is the accountable person. Project manager is the most responsible person for to deliver a project with respect to its objectives. But sponsor, the one who has signed the charter, he becomes the accountable person for a success or a failure of a project, because he has convinced his management that if we get this project done, the benefits will be more than the cost. And then he has influenced and then he has convinced their management and brought the funds for us. So and then he will be looking after this project, and then he'll be leading the project as such, and he wants our project to be successful at any cost. That's why your sponsor becomes the positive stakeholder in any industry. Take any project, first of all, it is his baby. So while managing the scope of the project, the first and foremost thing that the project manager in the team would do is, what kind of a scope management techniques that you wanted to use, how do you want to define the scope of the project, how do you want to manage the scope of the project, how do you want to control the scope of the project, and all that stuff. First, we'll get our own strategy ready that covers under plan, scope, management, basically. So there is a process. In PMBOK, if you see, there are 49 processes across your 10 knowledge areas and 5 process groups. There are 49 processes basically, out of which 6 processes are covered under scope management. So your plan, scope management, once again, I'm reiterating, how do you want to define the scope of the project? How do you want to manage the scope of the project? And how do you want to control the scope of the project? That strategy, we will write it, and then we will create it as part of scope management plan. It is just a strategy document. Please remember, it will not contain the actual scope of the project. At the same time, we will also put another strategy document which is called as requirements management plan. So this requirements management plan will not contain the actual requirements of the project. It will contain how do you want to collect the requirements, and what kind of techniques you wanted to use to collect the requirements. How do you want to prioritize the requirements? Because requirements are stakeholders' expectations, their wishes, their wants. Definitely there will be conflicting priorities. So as a project manager, we need to balance the conflicts, and then we need to diffuse those conflicts in a win-win situation and prioritize the requirements and get it done. So that would be your requirements management plan. The strategy is required. Please do not draw anything, so it will distract others, please. Right. So the strategies that you wanted to keep as part of managing the requirements. So that will be there in your requirements management plan. We are not going into the details of it. So in a respective sessions, we can get into the details of it. Now, the second important process that a project manager and the team would do, we will take the questions. You can put in the questions in the chat window. We will take the questions toward the end of the webinar. Okay. Right. So now the second important process that a project manager and the project team would do is collecting the requirements of the project. Like I mentioned, requirements are nothing but the project's, the stakeholders' expectations, their wishes, their wants. The moment I say their wishes and their wants, it will be unlimited. So we will collect the requirements. While collecting the requirements as a project manager, we will not say no to our stakeholders, because tomorrow we don't know which requirement will be of their high priority and which requirement will be of their next high priority. So while collecting the requirements, we will not say no. We will diligently collect all those requirements, their wishes, their wants. Let them tell. So that is nothing but we will collect and document in a document called requirement documentation. So let them tell, okay, requirement number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's say 7, 8, 9, 10. So we collected all the requirements. And at the same time, we will also try to create one more document here, which we call it as requirement traceability matrix. Requirement traceability matrix, meaning which requirement is originating from which objective. Tomorrow, if some business stakeholder comes and says like my objective 1 is more important than objective 2, and all the requirements that are concerned about objective 1 has to be done first, that will this document will serve that purpose. Also, which requirement is originating from which objective. So tomorrow if someone says like, okay, requirement number 5 is coming from which objective, so we can go back as a project manager and we can trace it back. It's not only this, after some time, this requirement traceability matrix can be expanded also. For example, down the line when the project is in execution or in further planning, let's say designing and all that. So now R4. So R4 may have several high level designs. Let's say high level design 77. And then high level designs may have several low level designs. Let's say low level design 120, for example. This low level design may have several test cases. Let's say test case number 245. So after some time, if any quality engineer comes to a project manager and says, why do we need this test case number 245? What is the importance of this test case in the project? And why should I be testing it against? Or what should I be testing it against? So the project manager, if he really maintains this kind of a requirement traceability matrix, he can simply go back and trace it back to the quality engineer saying like, test case number 245 is from low level design 120, which is a part of high level design 77, which is a part of our requirement number 4, which is a part of our objective number 2. That is the importance of requirement traceability matrix. Now, while collecting the requirements, there can be a number of tools and techniques. For example, our team can reach out to the client's team and then we can meet. So meetings is a to one of the tool and technique, let's say. And our team can interview client's team and thereby collect the requirements. So interviews becomes one of the tool and technique there. And our team can brainstorm with client's team and thereby collect the requirements. So brainstorming can become one of the tool and technique. Our team can prioritize the requirements by using a process called voting, for example. So let me show it to you what I am talking now currently. I'm talking about what are the different tools and techniques that we have to collect the requirements. So requirement documentation. So every process. So let's say we are collecting the requirements. So there are some inputs. Please be on mute. Please be on mute. We can answer the questions later. Please be on mute. Please be on mute. We can answer the questions later. So collecting the requirements is nothing but for every process, if you see, there will be certain inputs, there will be certain tools and techniques to conduct that process, and there will be certain outputs. So in PMP, in PMBOK, if you see, there are 49 logically interconnected processes. So that meaning what? The outputs of one process can become an input to one or more other processes. So what I'm trying to tell is while collecting the requirements, so we may use all of these techniques, or we may use only some of these techniques, or we may use only one of this technique, or we may not be using all this any of these techniques. Because please remember what PMI has mentioned. PMI has mentioned that these are all the collection of best practices across the globe from multiple industries and proven practices, and they have put it in a structured way. So it is up to us whether what kind of a techniques will be helpful in our project, so we can tailor and customize. So we can brainstorm with the client SMEs and then collect the requirements, and then we can interview them and we can arrange some focus groups. And if the audience is very large, we can send some questionnaires, thereby collecting the requirements. And if you want to prioritize some requirements, we can go for voting process, and like we can take the decision making on majority, more than 50% voting for it, plurality and all that stuff. And for example, let me take one more thing: observations in conversations. For example, if your stakeholder is reluctant to give the requirements, or if the stakeholder has got the inability to articulate the requirements, then obviously, then what to do then? So send there might be a chances where you can send some couple of team members to the stakeholder. Why? First of all, a stakeholder will be reluctant or inability to give the inability is fine, but why he is reluctant to give the requirements? For example, if you are going for any automation software that will cause certain manual jobs to be reduced, for example, I'm telling, or if you are going for any project which will reduce certain processes and thereby certain people, for example, in a given company. So obviously, so those people who are actually working currently will be the right people to give you the requirements, but those people may not be motivated enough to give you the requirements, and they might become a negative stakeholders also in some context. So then you have to send maybe a couple of your team members to them, and then try to observe what our stakeholder is doing, and thereby collecting the requirements and all that stuff. So like I mentioned, I'm not getting into the details of it. prototypes. When do you want to use prototypes? To get the early feedback from the customer. For example, we are constructing an international airport in one of the country. Do you think the government of that country will be looking at the final product directly? Definitely not. So they'll be looking into your early prototype, in the sense like the miniature, and the where the runway will come, or where the international immigration center will be there, and all that stuff. So, and then you will get the feedback, and then you will go for a main model, or a the real model basically. So that's about your collecting the requirements. Again, I'm giving coming back. Your requirements are nothing but the customer's wishes, their wants. We will not say no while collecting the requirements, and we have got several tools and techniques to collect the requirements. And you may want to use any one of, or a couple of them, or all of them, depending on your context of the project, and then collect the requirements and document in the requirement documentation. And then traceability matrix, which requirement is originating from which objective. This is your traceability matrix basically. Now, like I mentioned earlier, not all the requirements will be in the scope. Absolutely, because requirements are nothing but the stakeholders' wishes, their wants. So now there should be another process where the project manager and team will sit with the client or the sponsor, and then they will try to understand. They'll try to draw the boundaries. What is included in my project and what is excluded from my project. So which is nothing but your defined scope process. What is included in my project and what is excluded from my project. And that is nothing but you're freezing your scope, and you're making everybody on a common page, on a common understanding that what is the current scope of the project basically, which we call in our PMBOK language or PMI language as project scope statement. This project scope statement becomes the basis for the scope baseline, that is upcoming scope baseline. But this will be the source of truth for the current project with respect to the scope of the project basically. If any scope changes are attracted, like any existing requirement is taken away, or additional requirement is has to be added and all that, it has to come through a change control process. And if it is approved, then your scope statement will change basically. But before that, what exactly is our scope statement? The important elements I'll tell you. It contains your product scope. The product scope is nothing but the features, functions, and characteristics of the product, which is nothing but your requirements basically. So let's say your sponsor and team told like, Naveen, we just need to get 2468 done as of now. Nothing else is required, though it is wished by my team. But as of now, with the current constraints that we have, like maybe a schedule constraint or a budget constraint and all that, and then we just need to get this done as early as possible, 2, 4, 6, and 8, which is nothing but product scope. And also we will try to collect the acceptance criteria, product acceptance criteria. Once we really deliver the product to our customer, what is the criteria that he will check against our product, so that either he accepts or rejects our final deliverable, which is nothing but acceptance criteria. And then your definition of a deliverable, so that we can manage it in a better way. So this will bring everybody onto a common page, that what are we trying to deliver as part of this project. So what are we trying to deliver? What are those deliverables that we agreed between us, in the sense between the performing organization and the client organization. So we agreed on this, we agreed on the criteria, and we agreed on the actual scope that we would like to deliver finally. So 2, 4, 6, and 8. So let us ask them to formalize it. That means the sponsor has to sign it, so that everybody officially knows now this is the scope of the project and this is what we need to deliver. So uh, now we understood that what exactly we need to deliver with respect to the scope. Now it becomes the project managers and the team's responsibility now to decompose this deliverable into simpler and more manageable component. Let's say, for example, we need to or paint a house. For example, we need to paint a house. Painting a house is our project. So ground floor 2 rooms, first floor 3 rooms, and all that, let's say. So painting a building, it becomes our deliverable basically. And then we will decompose that into simpler and more manageable components: first floor and second floor. Why do you want to decompose that into simpler and more manageable components? It is there in that statement itself, for the better management of the project. So room number A, room number B, for example. So we are trying to create what? This is the fourth process under scope management. We are trying to create WBS, work breakdown structure. We are trying to create the work breakdown structure. So if painting the building is our project, and then room number A, room number B, room number C, room number D, and room number E, for example. So this becomes our WBS, basically painting a building, first floor, second floor, and all that. So now what exactly is a WBS? Deliverable oriented hierarchical structure. That is the definition. That's it, 4 words: deliverable oriented hierarchical structure. And what is the tool and technique that we use to create WBS? Decomposition is a technique. What do we mean by decomposition? The process of dividing the deliverable into simpler and more manageable components. That is nothing but decomposition. Now, what exactly, up to how many levels you wanted to divide like this? So up to a level after which there is no logical further subdivision possible. Those many levels you can go for it according to the PMBOK. But logically, if you see, you cannot go on divide like that. So some people may have a theory called 880 rule. We will not get into that. So, but at least as of now, please be on mute. There is some background noise. So up to a level after which there is no logical further subdivision possible. And one more thing, who creates WBS? It's the team. Most of the times we think project manager should create the WBS. No. Who is the one who is actually doing the work? Who knows the work better? They should be planning it in a much better way. So as a project manager, we should allow the team to be part of creating the WBS. The main aspect of involving the team to create the WBS is we will get teams buy-in, their commitment will get. So we will get the teams buy-in. Otherwise, if we create the WBS and throw it on the face of the team, they may not be able to really connect with your WBS and all that. And next thing is, like the lowest level in the WBS, the technical term, work packages and all that stuff. I do not want to get into this because it needs some other explanation here. And also, like for example, WBS can become a best tool to communicate within the team. So communication tool also. Communication with, not within the team, but also with the stakeholders, because if you communicate this WBS to the stakeholders, they will clearly understand what is included in my project and what is excluded from my project and all that. And WBS has got many other elements. If I get into it, it itself becomes a 1 hour topic minimum. So like for example, WBS follows 100% rule, WBS follows progressive elaboration or rolling wave planning and all that stuff. So now what are we trying to do? We are trying to create the WBS. So once we create the WBS, you will get a scope baseline as per the PMBOK. But scope baseline is nothing but it's a combination of WBS plus WBS dictionary, plus earlier whatever we got it, project scope statement where our sponsor signed. These three are the components of WBS. We understood what is WBS. We understood what is project scope statement where sponsor signed. But what is this WBS dictionary? WBS is just a graphical picture if you see, right? So anything about the elements of the WBS, it will be much detailedly explained in another document called WBS dictionary. So your project scope baseline is nothing but it's a combination of these three elements, and then we'll get it approved. So from now onwards, your project will be tracked, monitored, or controlled against scope baseline with respect to the scope of the project. So if you come back and look into this slide deck, if you see, where are we on this? So let me take this away once again. Somebody wrote here. So let me clear this red color things. Yeah. Right. So we collected the requirements and then we defined the scope. So we collected the requirements, then we defined the scope. We got the project scope statement. And then now we have taken that scope statement and especially the deliverables out of it, and we decomposed that. And then we got a scope baseline, which is nothing but WBS, WBS dictionary, and your project scope statement. These are the planning processes. Actually, if you go back and see my deck here, these first four are nothing but the planning processes. Now let's say that your project is in execution. So thinking that, assuming that the scheduling is also done, costing is also done, and respective other all planning processes are done, and your project is in execution, for example. Let's say your project is in execution, that becomes what then? So if your project in execution, I'll not get into the details of it. That means we are trying to deliver, deliverable will be produced in the execution phase, let's say. That means when you're painting a building, you have already painted the building. So will you directly give it to the customer for validating the scope or final testing? No. What we will do, this deliverable, we will test it internally. So that will go through our control quality process, our internal quality control. Then from here, it will become verified deliverable, and this we will give it to our customer. So our customer will validate the scope, which is the fifth process in the scope management. The final testing or the user acceptance testing, we can call it as in some industries. So we gave the painted and tested building to him for him to validate the scope, basically verified deliverable. So now we are in validating the scope process, which is nothing but our fifth process in the scope management, which is nothing but in our monitoring and controlling. Who validates the scope? Customer validates the scope. Then what does he need to validate the scope as an input? Verified deliverable he needs as an input, and also he needs scope baseline, because scope baseline contains project scope statement, and project scope contains product acceptance criteria. Once he is testing the deliverable, he should know what exactly the criteria that he signed, and also the our from our side the verified deliverable. So that means whatever the tested deliverable that we have from our end, so we are going to give him for him to test it, basically. Now he uses inspection as a tool and technique to test it. And then he has got basically two things now: either accept the deliverable or reject the deliverable. In PMBOK, rejection can be from several reasons in multiple industries. So they'll ask us to raise a change request and take the next actions accordingly. But accepted deliverable is a document. So validate scope is nothing but the process of formalizing the acceptance. That means it needs to be signed once again. According to the PMI, email is considered as informal written way of communication. So the formal way of communication is your bond papers, agreements, where you see the signatures and all that. That you can customize between you and your client. But as per PMI, the process of formalizing the acceptance is nothing but validate scope. So let's say we got the accepted deliverable done. So which is nothing but your, so we have painted the building and we got the requirements, and then we defined the scope, and then we created the WBS, and then in the execution we painted, means we created the deliverable, and we have sent it through the customer's testing, and then we got the accepted deliverable, which is your nothing but your fifth process, which is validate scope process. Now, your scope management says the last process, which is control the process scope. As a project manager, while executing the project, not only while executing, while planning, while executing and all that, we need to, day in, day out, we need to control the scope. If you don't have a proper control on the scope, what will result, which I told earlier, scope creep will result, basically. What is scope creep? Uncontrolled or unwanted changes coming into the project is scope creep. That will result. To avoid scope creep, the project manager should have the ultimate control on the scope. What for that? What he has to have? He has to have his planned scope or approved scope, which is nothing but scope baseline, and always he will compare it with actual scope that we are delivering. So the planned scope versus actual scope. If there is any deviation, if that deviation is beyond the tolerance levels and all that, he may raise a change request. Otherwise, he'll keep on monitoring this scope and controlling this scope throughout the project and see that we deliver nothing extra, nothing less. That is where we started with what is scope, all the work required, and that is the only work required, nothing extra, nothing less. So that control scope process will enable the project manager to look into the everyday aspects of the project and see with respect to the scope baseline, are we really in line with the scope baseline? Are we deviating from the scope baseline? And if we are deviating, how much are we really deviating? And if that deviation is nothing but the permissible exceptions, nothing but the permissible deviation with. So if it is within the limits, fine. But if it is outside the limits, then we may have to go ahead and raise a change request and bring it back to the track. So that's what your control scope is all about. So if you see, and if I have to tie it back once again for you, all these things. So we are in validate scope. We were in validate scope. So that is where our verified deliverables got tested by the uh, customer, and then he accepted deliverables, and all the rejected deliverables can we will raise a change request and take the next action accordingly. And then the control scope, so which is the last process, which is the sixth process basically. And while controlling the scope, what exactly we need? Planned scope, which is nothing but our scope baseline, and approved scope is nothing but our scope baseline. And what exactly the current scope, the actual scope data? How come the project manager know the actual scope data? He will collect it from his respective teams who are actually executing the deliverables. So he will collect it in the form of meetings or in the form of reports or whatever it is. So which we call it as work performance data, but I'll not get into the details of it. The actual scope information will be there in this. So he will see the variance between the scope baseline and the actual scope. And then if everything is fine, we'll just keep some documents updated. Otherwise, if nothing, if something is really beyond our limits, then we may have to raise a change request. So this exactly completes your project scope management on a higher level. To brief you out what exactly is the scope management, project scope management. So I hope you got this on a higher level. We did not, in the interest of time, this webinar is for 1 hour. So I just wanted to give you a glimpse of this scope management, which I thought I am successful. So
Yeah.
Pankaj has mentioned, like, how about a project where there is no scope defined and stakeholders expectations are also there? As a project manager, how to deal with that project? So first of all, one thing we need to remember, as a project manager, we are ultimate responsible person for delivering the project within the constraints given. But who is ultimate accountable? So if anything that you need that needs to be done, so which is not there as per the process, so it's better to reach out to the sponsor and help him understand that we need to freeze the scope. And if he says no, 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 currently we can't freeze the scope and there's a lot of scope changes expected down the line, then predictive life cycle may not be a right approach for you. If there are a lot of scope changes coming in, then there are other different life cycles available. You may want to get into that and explore those. Nothing but your iterative life cycle or your adaptive life cycle or incremental life cycles. So those can be best life cycles if there is a lot of changes coming in. In fact, if I have to use that word called agile projects. So but the accountability lies with the sponsor. So there is nothing wrong in seeking sponsors help if there is no scope defined, because we are all in a formal way or a formal process oriented project management obviously. So your project should be, first of all, the scope has to be frozen, then only you can go for your further estimates of schedule, resourcing, or a cost management. Okay, right, any other questions? Yeah, thank you Pankaj for that. And somebody says, how can we manage scope in agile and waterfall? Okay, so these two are, so you have asked me a ocean based question basically. So managing the scope in waterfall becomes a very formal process, which we did for the last 40 minutes anyway. In agile, it's a different thing. It's a reverse triangle in agile. Your cost and schedule are fixed in agile, and your scope may be little vary depending on the iterations. So one iteration or one sprint, we can call it as, if you go by Scrum. So the scope would vary because it depends on the known factors, unknown factors, complexity of the user stories that you are picking up and all that stuff. So it becomes a very huge thing basically in the current context. So, but yes, in Agile, your scope can vary, but in traditional way, which is current webinar, your scope can vary, but through a perform integrated change control process basically. That's the major difference. But in agile, you don't need to have integrated change control process because your product backlog is not frozen. In traditional, yes, your scope statement is frozen. So when something is frozen and it should attract changes, then it should go through change control process. In agile, your product backlog is not frozen there. That means it is not been signed off basically. So it is allowed to grow and change. So that is the nature of agile projects. See, not everywhere your agile works, not everywhere your traditional works. It depends on the nature of the project that you're involved in, and pick up a right choice. Okay, so one more thing, just for your information, PMI has postponed the new way of conducting the exam. Of course, they have made it online anyway. I'm not talking about that. The new exam content outline, they have postponed it until Jan 2nd. So you have got 6 more months in the current PMBOK 6, in the current exam structure, you can take it. So please go ahead and use this opportunity. Otherwise, by July 2nd this year, they would have already changed the new structure, which they are going to include agile concepts also. But luckily, they have not done yet because of this COVID. They have postponed it to January 2nd, starting next year. So you have got 6 more months. So please go ahead and make this opportunity most out of it, and then attend the sessions, and then complete your PMP as early as possible. Right. Somebody says, like you mentioned product backlog, right? Please, can you shed some more light? Product backlog is out of scope for the current traditional project management. It is only in the agile way, and that too when you're using only Scrum. Okay. So product backlog is something which is open and grow, and it is a list of all the product requirements at that point of time. And then the product backlog will be owned by another entity, separate role called as product owner in agile, and that guy is the value optimizer, and he brings the most value out of the product backlog by keeping the most valuable work items on the top of the product backlog, so that the most highly valued items are always getting built in the upcoming sprints. That means the very first agile principle, delivering value early and often, and delivering value incrementally, is getting fulfilled there. That's why. So it is a little out of scope currently. I cannot mention more than this in the current scope. Okay. And is there any way to access PMBOK 6th edition online? As of now, no. It is a what do you call a copyrighted book, and you can become a member. So if you become a member of PMI, then you can download a free copy of PMBOK. So you need not purchase it separately. So when you go to the, you can also Google and see. If you become a member and take the exam, the overall cost as of now is $544. That includes your membership fee. But if you directly go ahead and write the exam, that is $555. So there is a $11 saving. And in fact, you can get the membership benefits for 1 year from the PMI. And in fact, you can download your own copy of PMBOK from there. So that is the best way to access to get the PMBOK. Be a member of PMI. $139 for the first 1 year, 129 plus $10 administration fee. But you will get a discounted exam fee for $405. So overall, it becomes $544, which is $11 less than directly paying the fee and writing the exam. So with that, your PMBOK is ideally free. So if you take a membership there, so you can buy it on their website. Okay. So this is what Johanna has already replied to Pankaj's question, but the best way is become a member and download it. Is there a difference applicable process for scope for projects that are for state or government? Actually speaking, this PMBOK is based on your government enterprises and processes, because in government enterprises and processes, they are much more procedure oriented and process oriented and highly formal in nature, all those processes and contracts. So your exact current scope management, whatever we have mentioned, is keeping an eye about those legal entities and governments involved basically. So certain other companies, if they do not want to get into these stringent processes, what they do is they take the PMBOK and they tailor or customize their project environment in an easier way. But for government related or any state entities in most of the countries, there is a perfect and procedure oriented documents has to be there with the proper sign offs. So your exact PMBOK is your PMBOK will work out for it. And whatever we told is keeping an eye all those stuff for today. Now, somebody says you mentioned PMP and product owner. What is the difference? What is the best route to take? It depends. No, there is no best route. Both. You're asking me, is apple taste good or does orange taste good? No, it depends on which you need. It depends on your need. So currently, if you're in a traditional way of doing the things, your PMP is the best and hottest certification across the globe. And if you're currently in the agile way, then definitely you need to choose your own role like Scrum Master or product owner and all that. It depends on your current organization, which role and what kind of a projects are getting executed in what methodology, then choose it. So it cannot be answered just like that. So
Yeah.
somebody says, can you please throw some light on product scope and project scope? Okay, no problem. So this will take it as a last question. So probably, so let's take it because so now, so once again, so just a last question. So we have already discussed about it, but I'll throw some light. Product scope is nothing but the features, functions, and characteristics of the product that we are going to develop. That means your stakeholders are going to give the product scope, the features, functions, and characteristics. And project scope is nothing but what kind of a project management techniques that you wanted to use to deliver this product. So to deliver a product, there should be some project management techniques. How do you want to manage the scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and all that? That becomes your project scope. So your project scope is defined by project manager and the team, and your product scope, the features, functions, and the characteristics of a product that we are going to deliver is given by the stakeholders basically. That's the difference between product scope and project scope. So everything went fine as expecting. No questions about the workshop. Thanks for your time. Thank you so much.